Good morning, class. This is Aprajita, your science teacher. I hope you all are doing good. Today we will start block 9, that is fertilization and seed dispersal. We will study topic 1 of this block, that is fertilization. Class, be ready with your content book, workbook, notebook, pencil, eraser, etc. Okay? In your last block, that is block 8, you had learned about male and female parts of a flower, right? What is male part of a flower? Tell me. Male part of a flower is known as stamen, okay? Which is made up of male part of a flower, that is stamen, which is made up of anther and filament, right? Now tell me, female part of a flower is known as? Tell me. Female part of a flower is known as pistil, right? Which is made up of ovary, style and stigma. Clear? Now come to the next question. What is pollination? All of you know, right? What is pollination? The process of transferring pollen from the anther to the stigma is known as pollination, right? Anther is a part of male reproductive system of flower and stigma is the part of female reproductive part of a flower, right? Now come to today's topic. What is our aim for today? The process of fertilization in flowers. Today we will learn about process of fertilization in flowers. Okay? Our keywords are ovule and fertilization. In this topic we will learn about ovule and fertilization. Okay? In this picture, you can see a flower or a bisexual flower. Okay. In this picture, you can see about stigma, style and ovary of a bisexual flower and anther and filament of a flower, right? This flower contains both female and male reproductive parts. That's why it is known as bisexual flower. Okay? Now come to activity part. Do you know what is pollinated flower? Tell me. Do you know what is a pollinated flower? When pollen from the anther falls on the stigma of a flower, then it is known as pollinated flower, right? When pollen grains fall from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Stigma is a female reproductive part, right? Then it is known as pollinated flower. This you already know, right? Now, come to the next one. What is present in pollen grains? Do you know what is present in pollen grains? Male cells are present in pollen grains, right? Pollen grains are male reproductive part of a flower. Clear? Now tell me, what happens after pollination? Do you know what happens after pollination? After pollination, seed formation is occurred, right? The process of seed formation starts after pollination. Clear? Now in this picture, you can see how fertilization takes place in a flower. Okay? Class, pause this video pause this video and see the different parts of a flower. Okay? I hope this picture of fertilization is clear, right? Now come to activity discussion. Okay? Tell me, what happens when pollen grains reach the stigma of a flower? Do you know what happens when pollen grains reach the stigma of a flower? When pollen grains stick on the stigma or land on the stigma, they develop pollen tube, right? Pollen grains develop pollen tube that carries male cells down to the ovary through style. Okay? When pollen grains came on the stigma or stick on the stigma, they develop a pollen tube, and that pollen tube carries male cells, which is present in what? Male cells are present in pollen grains, right? That male cells come down to the ovary by the help of style, right? Okay, now come to the next one. What is present inside the ovules? As we know, male cells are present inside pollen grains like this. Female cells are present inside ovules. Clear? In this picture, you can see clearly about pollen grains, stigma, pollen tube, ovule and ovary. Okay? Now come to the question of the day. Your question of the day is, fusion of male and female cells are known as what? Okay? This is your question of the day. Okay? Give the answer in your school year. Okay? Now, come to the generalized discussion. Okay? Your question is, why does a pollen grain form a pollen tube? Do you know why does a pollen grain form a pollen tube? Pollen grains form a pollen tube to carry male cells that are present in pollen grains to the female cells in the ovules, right? Now come to the next one. What happens when pollen grains reach the ovules? Do you know what happens when pollen grains reach the ovules? As pollen grains contain male cells, you know this, right? Pollen grains contain male cells and ovules contain what? Ovules contain female cells. Okay? Once the pollen grains reach the ovules, the male cells fuse with female cells. Right? When pollen grains reach the ovules, the male cells fuse with female cells. And this process of fusion is known as fertilization. Okay? If the question comes, what is fertilization? You will say, what you will say? When male cells fuse with female cells, the process of fusion is known as fertilization. Okay? And tell me, what will happen after fertilization? Do you know what will happen after fertilization? After fertilization, ovules gradually develop into seeds, right? Okay, now let's try some higher order thinking question, right? Your question is, which is more important for reproduction in plants? Pollination is more important for reproduction or fertilization is more important for reproduction? Tell me, pollination is more important or fertilization is more important? Or both are important for the process of reproduction in plants? Do you know which is more important? Class, think about this question. Okay? Take some time and think about this question. Answer of this question we will discuss in our recap and correction class. Okay? Shall we summarize today's topic? What we have learned today? We had learned that a flower is consist of male and a female parts known as stamen and pistil, right? These stamen and pistil or the female and male part of a flower is helpful in fertilization of a flower. Okay? The anther of the stamen produces pollen grains and the pollen grains contain male cells, right? In the process of pollination, when pollination occurs, pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma. Okay? Pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of the flower. This is called pollination. Okay? And different agents are used for this process, right? This we know already, right? And when pollen grains stick on the stigma, these pollen grains develop a pollen tube. You can see in your content book also, in the picture, you can see pollen grains develop a pollen tube that carries male cells, which are in the form of pollen grains down to the ovary by the help of style. Clear? Ovary has one or more ovules, right? And ovules contains female cells. Clear? When the male cells reached to the ovules, they join with the female cells, right? When male cells join with female cells, the fusion of male and female cells is called fertilization. Clear? After fertilization, the ovary changes into fruit. The ovary changes into fruit and the ovules change into seeds. Clear? Firstly, ovary change into fruit, right? And ovules change into seeds. Clear? This process is carried out after fertilization, right? Fertilization is clear to everybody? Now, your homework part. You have to finish S1 in your workbook. Okay? And you have to do your PQ 1 and 2 in your notebook. In your notebook 1. Okay? Complete your PQs 1 and 2 in your first notebook. Okay? And finish your workbook S1 today only. Okay? Class, your today's topic fertilization is clear now. Okay? Is completed. Right? If you have any confusion in this topic, you can post your comments in the comment box section in school. Yeah. Okay? Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.